Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. The mass resignation that cost a company millions. I spent several years working as an expat senior staff geologist in the Middle East for a Southern European construction company that had somehow convinced itself it could play oil company. On paper, I was the senior geologist. In reality, I was the de facto exploration manager without the exploration manager pay, power, or authority. The only thing I was given in abundance was stress, courtesy of the general manager, a man so aggressively incompetent it was almost a talent. Let's call him Caldwell. Caldwell had spent his career as an engineer at a big oil major, which in his mind meant he automatically knew more about geology, geophysics, petrophysics, drilling, and field operations than the actual experts he hired. He corrected everyone constantly, confidently, and incorrectly. His management style was something between chaotic micromanagement and toddler-level rage. He would scream across the office about anything: coffee pods running out, paperwork he hadn't bothered to process, invoices he'd forgotten to sign, or pipe deliveries he personally screwed up by picking the lowest bidder, usually the company that slid him the fattest kickback. He insulted everyone, loudly and constantly. Locals were useless. Expats were entitled. Engineers from the subcontinent were called slurs, he said in front of entire meeting rooms. He berated staff in front of partners, throwing tantrums that made seasoned oil executives physically cringe. He complained that the company was the worst effing oil outfit in the Middle East, and honestly, that was the only thing he ever got right. Everything boiled over after we drilled a well based on one of my prospects. The logs looked awful, but only because the cheap crew Caldwell hired had botched half the recording. I tried to explain that the zones needed relogging, but Caldwell refused. Instead, he launched into a full 30-minute tirade so loud the secretaries in the hallway froze. He insulted my intelligence, my competence, and even my university, ending with, "I don't know how they gave you a degree. They must hand them out like candy." I'd spent 26 years in the industry and had been yelled at plenty. But something broke in me at that moment. I walked out of his office knowing I was done. Not eventually, not after finding a new job, done. I began quietly planning my escape. A few nights later, several of us expats were grabbing drinks, the usual Thursday tradition before the Friday through Saturday weekend. After a couple of scotches, I casually said I was planning a runner. Every head snapped toward me. Turns out almost everyone was fantasizing about the same thing, but no one wanted to be the first to jump. The moment I said the words, one of the senior engineers muttered, "If you go, I go." Someone else said, "Make that two." Within minutes, we realized that nearly the entire senior technical staff was willing to abandon ship the moment the first person did. And that person was me. So we planned it, quietly, calmly, efficiently. First, we all gave discreet notice to our landlords. Because the company paid our rent through a bulk annual contract, the landlords didn't care if we left early. They'd already been paid. In fact, they were thrilled. They get to rent out our villas again for double. Canceling utilities took about as much effort as sneezing. One email each to the electric company, water authority, and internet provider. We printed the automated confirmations to show border guards in case anyone got clever. Meanwhile, our kids packed their rooms like it was just another summer trip home. Our spouses boxed up anything sentimental. Everything else got placed in storage or handed to a local shipping company who barely blinked. Expats vanish all the time. The star of the plan was the flight. Our contracts guaranteed business class travel back to our home countries during annual leave, so we booked an entire British Airways business class cabin on the same flight to London. Literally, the whole section. Adults, kids, spouses, everyone. A metal tube full of people abandoning an oil company and the most dramatic mass resignation the region had probably ever seen. Weeks crawled by and the company atmosphere got weird. That's the thing people don't tell you. When you stop caring, the stress lifts off you like fog burned off by the sun. The locals noticed immediately. A few whispered that something felt different. We eventually told several of them the truth, but only those we trusted completely. Their reaction? Mostly laughter. And promises to make bacon sandwiches for anyone who snitched, which, if you know the region, tells you how close we were as friends. School let out, temperatures climbed to hellish levels, and as expected, dozens of expats requested their standard summer leave. As expected, Caldwell denied every one of them, He enjoyed denying leave. Power gave him a high he couldn't get from competence. His refusals just made our departure sweeter. Finally, the chosen Friday arrived, our escape day. We rented a bus to pick everyone up, luggage loaded, doors shut. No one looked back. At the airport, check-in was smooth. Passport control was effortless. None of us were important enough for anyone to block our departure. Once we cleared security, we hit duty-free, then the English pub, and toasted to the most synchronized resignation in company history. Seated in business class, sipping my third double vodka with bitter lemon, I did a mental tally of who the company was losing in a single afternoon. It wasn't just me. It was the senior geophysicist, the senior petrophysicist, the senior geomodeler, the senior reservoir engineer, the drilling engineer, the operations geologist, the logistics manager, the senior surveyor, the HSEQ manager, and 3 administrative staff. Essentially, the entire technical backbone. A company of 50 employees cannot survive losing 11 critical roles in one day. When the plane lifted off, we all turned on our phones, dozens of missed calls, hundreds of messages. Caldwell had tried calling all of us individually, then tried calling our wives, then tried calling anyone connected to us. We'd blocked his number, but his text still came through. His first one said, "Where are you? Why are you not at work?" The second read, "Get your butts in here immediately." The third said, "This isn't funny. Come back and we'll pretend this didn't happen." We were somewhere over Eastern Europe when he texted again, "You're all finished, every one of you. You will never work in this industry again." I ordered another vodka. When we landed in London, it was mid-morning there, but nearly noon back in the Gulf. That was when everything exploded. Caldwell had called an emergency meeting with whoever was left, which was basically the local staff and a few T-boys, and demanded to know where everyone was. They shrugged. They said they didn't know. They asked what happened. And Caldwell snapped. He fired every local employee on the spot, all of them, without notice, without paperwork, without HR, without even the minimal legal process required in the country. This was not wise. One of the secretaries he fired was the niece of the Minister of Employment Affairs. Within hours, the company was fined thousands per day for unlawful termination, and because the naturalization laws made it nearly impossible to fire locals legally, Caldwell had triggered a bureaucratic war he had no chance of winning. Consequences hit fast. Without engineers, geologists, or technical staff, the company immediately lost 2 drilling rigs. 2 wells under development had to be abandoned mid-operation with millions already sunk into them. The seismic program collapsed, burning through a multi-million-dollar tender. Their rating with the ministry was downgraded, meaning they could no longer bid competitively for rigs, crews, or field services. 6 of the remaining locals immediately applied for and were hired by the National Oil Company, citing organizational instability. Field development halted. Several government approvals were rescinded. The company defaulted on contractual obligations. A quarter of its exploration acreage was forfeited, and because locals legally had to be paid, even if fired improperly, they spent months getting full salaries to sit at home and play FIFA. Within weeks, the office was essentially dead. As for Caldwell, last I heard he resurfaced in South Texas trying to peddle shady oil investments to desperate independents. Unfortunately for him, the industry is a small world. He kept running into people who recognized him, and in 2 cases, people who used to work for him. One of them leaned across the table and told him, "F off, Caldwell, and don't let the door hit you in the butt. I'd hate for you to damage something important." I slept very, very well that night, and every night since. Watching an incompetent tyrant finally discover the limits of his own delusions is one of life's finer pleasures. He built an empire of ego, ran it like a tantrum with the title, and the minute the adults left the room, the whole thing unraveled faster than one of his kickback contracts. And our next story. A farmer neighbor tried to claim his road. I live on a piece of subdivided farmland that sits far off the public roads, tucked behind fields, barns, and a couple of scattered rural houses. The only way to reach it is through 2 or 3 dirt access roads that connect the private property to the paved state and city roads. It's always been a quiet rural setup, one where people generally mind their business. That is, until one of the farming neighbors decided he suddenly owned the access road behind his house and took issue with me driving along it to reach my home. One morning, without any warning, the New Jersey State Police showed up on the property. Because of that neighbor's complaint, they wrote my vehicle up as abandoned and immediately ordered it towed. The tow truck came down the dirt path, escorted by state police, drove onto the private property, onto my lawn, and yanked my car away from directly in front of my house. I wasn't outside at the time, but my neighbor across the way recorded the entire thing through their kitchen window. So I knew exactly where the car was and what the officers did. They made no attempt to knock on my door, contact me, or even check the obvious dealer plate suction cupped in the rear window, which clearly displayed contact information for the original dealer. When I called the police later that day to ask why my vehicle had been towed, I was told it had been abandoned in the middle of the road a mile away with no plates. That was a complete fabrication. They had taken it from my property. The video proves it, and they knew it. The landlord also confirmed he hadn't authorized the tow, meaning the state police entered private land, escorted a tow truck onto it, and removed a vehicle without probable cause or any attempt to verify ownership. To make matters worse, the towing company didn't have keys, so they pulled the vehicle onto the truck using brute force, ripping up my grass, backing over a bush, and damaging both my transfer case and my exhaust in the process. Then the nightmare got worse. They charged me more than $700 to retrieve the car. When I arrived to pick it up, they had skid-loaded it into a corner like junk, and even after I paid the fee, they told me I would have to come back the next day because no one's here to get it out. They held my vehicle hostage for another 24 hours while I missed work, trying to sort out paperwork, calls, and the damage report. I ended up losing almost an entire week trying to untangle this mess. Because of that forced week off, my boss finally had enough and fired me. One neighbor's petty complaint, one false claim by the state police, and one reckless tow company sent my job, my vehicle, and my finances spiraling in a matter of days. Update. After losing a week of work and eventually my job, something in me snapped. I'd played everything straight, kept to myself, used the access road the same way every tenant before me had, and respected everyone's property boundaries. But having my car yanked off my own lawn, damaged, lied about, held for ransom, and then being fired because of the chaos pushed me past my limit. So instead of letting it go, I gathered every piece of evidence I had. The video from the neighbor, photos of the damage, screenshots of the dealer plate, and the towing receipt, and walked directly into the county sheriff's office to file an official complaint. The reaction was immediate. The deputy who reviewed the video instantly recognized that the vehicle had not been abandoned anywhere. It was parked on private land next to a house in plain view. He also noticed that the tow truck driver had driven off the designated access path and onto my lawn, which is illegal without homeowner permission or an emergency order. When the sheriff realized the state police had written a completely false location on the tow slip, he forwarded the complaint directly to Internal Affairs. What I thought would take months took only a week before I got a phone call requesting a formal statement. While that was happening, my landlord also got involved. When he learned a state police officer had escorted a tow truck onto his land without consent, he was furious. He contacted the State Agricultural Board and the County Zoning Office, both of whom confirmed that the access road in question is legally protected for tenant use, meaning the farming neighbor had no authority to dictate who could or couldn't use it. The landlord then filed a complaint against the farmer for interfering with tenant access, which triggered an investigation into his prior behavior on the subdivision. The farmer didn't take that well. He doubled down, claiming he owned the whole road. Unfortunately for him, the county surveyor shut that down immediately. The access road had been registered decades earlier as shared ingress for all subdivided lots. His attempt to block or control it was a violation of zoning law, and he was slapped with a formal warning and a fine. When he tried to argue, more complaints from other tenants surfaced. Apparently, I wasn't the only one he'd been harassing. Meanwhile, the tow company faced their own reckoning. Internal Affairs reviewed the footage of how they dragged the car with no keys and caused mechanical damage. Because they performed a tow on private property without lawful authorization and caused property destruction in the progress, they were found in violation of multiple state towing regulations. Their license was temporarily suspended pending review, and I was instructed to submit an itemized damage estimate. When the shop estimated repairs at over $3,000, the tow company was forced to pay it in full to avoid losing their license permanently. But the biggest consequence fell on the state trooper who authorized the tow. The IA report concluded that he falsified the tow location, ignored an identifiable dealer plate, failed to make any attempt to contact the vehicle owner, and improperly facilitated a private property tow without exigent circumstances. He was placed on administrative leave pending disciplinary action. A few months later, a neighbor who works in local government told me the trooper had been reassigned permanently, a quiet way of saying he was removed from field duty because of the complaint. As for the farming neighbor, the final blow came when the landlord and county zoning office jointly issued him a written order restricting his interference with the access roads. Any further complaints or harassment directed at tenants could result in civil penalties or even removal of certain agricultural permits. Losing those permits would impact his business directly, and he finally backed down. He doesn't look in my direction, he does not speak, and he absolutely does not attempt to control the access roads anymore. Ironically, the entire ordeal became the incident that got me a better job. When my former boss learned the full truth, including the police misconduct and the towing violations, he admitted firing me too quickly. He couldn't rehire me due to staffing changes, but he gave me a glowing reference letter acknowledging I'd been dealing with forces outside my control. That reference landed me a higher-paying job within a month. In the end, the neighbor was fined and formally warned. The tow company paid for every cent of damage and lost their license for weeks, and the trooper who lied was taken off patrol. It took time, stress, and far more effort than it ever should have, but justice caught up with every single one of them. What do you all think? Has there ever been a time when you had to become your own advocate in the face of a broken system? Share your stories below. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.